Helen, thank you so much for your time this evening. And I suppose time is one of the key words coming out of what I've been able to glean from the first part of your book. And I was going to say to you, I haven't had the time to read the entire thing, but that really is key to some of what you are trying to bring across in that book. You have to make the time to feed your own recovery, to de-stress and to make time for yourself. Is that one of the keys that you're trying to bring across in the book?
Yeah, thank you, Marcel. I think, so many people want to increase their performance, but they haven't got an increased recovery schedule. And recovery actually takes time. And I've used the analogy in a book because I like words, as you can see by this books behind me. But I would encourage people to think of their day as a sentence. And then what is your full stop at the end of your day? So what activity could you put in place? Because I think we're quite good at weekend recovery, and I think we're quite good at holiday recovery. But what I find we need often some work in is the daily recovery, to kind of balance out your schedule, and the monthly recovery. So I think every day needs a full stop. I have a bath, I change into my pajamas. I'm that girl in my pajamas at 6 o'clock. And then I sit down on the couch and have a whiskey with my husband. And that's my full stop. And then I don't work again. Having a weekend recovery ritual, monthly recovery ritual, because often the only way we know that February is moving to March next week is that we have debit orders going through our account, which is not a great way to celebrate the fact that, we've gotten through a month, and to actually be celebrating and grateful. And then obviously to amplify your holiday recovery schedules.
Now, you speak about mindfulness practice, and I thought that's so key because it does take practice, doesn't it? Because we live in a society where you are told everything opposite to that. You need to practice other things. You need to practice things that will feed your career. You need to practice how to cook. You need to practice exercise, I suppose. For some people, that's more work than anything else. We really do need to instill that in ourselves, that spending time with ourselves or doing something fun. I know that's something that you speak about, doing something fun to feed a different part of your mind and body is key. We need to practice these things as well.
Yeah, I think mindfulness is a muscle. And I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. And initially, it's quite hard. I mean, if you use the analogy of a phone detox, so someone said to me the other day, I've read your book and I'm going to leave my phone in a drawer for a whole day. And I said, I wouldn't advise that. I would rather advise you do it for like half an hour at a time. Start your rituals off small and then you build up and with practice. And I think that, one of the things that I mention a lot in the book is the power of small things, because often I think why we're not successful at change is we go too big. We want to, do an MBA, run the comrades, lose 25 kilograms. And our goals need to be small, but not to underemphasize how smallness compounded can be incredibly powerful.
I suppose now when you use the example of somebody saying they're going to leave their phone in a drawer for a full day, if people are watching us chat now on their couches, there were a few dirty looks and side eyes to whoever was sitting on the couch on their phone and not be like focusing on the person sitting next to them or watching this interview together. Because I suppose if you do take on something too big and set these big goals, there is a large possibility that you won't reach that goal or something will happen and then you end up feeling like a failure. And that doesn't help if we're trying to give ourselves a boost in whatever direction we want at that time.
Well, it's quite appropriate, Marcel, that we're having this interview now at the end, because this week in February traditionally is the week of every year that people fall off the bus of their New Year's resolutions. So the last week in February is the one, because often then we just think, like, why did I even bother to change? It's too hard. Life is too busy. And I think, the year's gotten off to kind of a rocketing start, and there's definitely a more optimistic spirit around. But it's, if the goals were smaller and more realistic, then we wouldn't fall off the bus so dramatically in the last week in February. And that's why the gym car parks are full in January and empty by March.
There's probably a lot of knowing looks now at each other in people's households listening to you say that at the time. The other thing that you focus on in your book is how important sleep is.
Yeah, I believe you need to sleep your way to the top unashamedly for 7 to 8 hours.
Is that
And there's a
possible
wonderful
in the
quote.
modern life that we live? Is that possible? People have a job, they are mothers, or they've got a side hustle happening on the side. How practical is it, those 8 to 9 hours a night? Or do you believe the benefit pays back in triplicate after the fact?
Yeah, I think that there's got to be a belief system change before we change our behavior. And I think the belief system is around moving away from that old style kind of 90s, early 2000, those investment banker kind of cultures where it was like you'll sleep when you're dead, or people wore their sleep deprivation as a badge of honor. Now you look at Jeff Bezos, who's the richest man in the world, he sleeps for 8 hours a night. Why does he do that? Because he knows he's cleverer, he's more strategic, he's probably a better father, he's just all round a better human being when we sleep. And I think people have gotten so used to having so little sleep that, we actually don't know how it feels to get 7 to 8 hours.
I suppose Jeff Bezos is an interesting example because he's also been partying up a storm as part of his divorce circus, some would call it, as well. But I do
he's
get
definitely having a full-blown midlife crisis. Yeah.
He really is. Just before I let you go, Helen, because of course we don't want to give everything away from your book. You actually want people to go out and buy it, and I quite like the style of the book, because you don't feel like it's something that you need to feel weighed down by. You can read a little chapter or a couple of pages every night and put those little practices in play in your next day before you read the next few pages. So I am quite enjoying that. But I do want to ask you one final question before I go. That almost puts on your day job hat outside of the book that you've just written. You are the CEO, the Chief Excitement Officer of the networking company. I mean, that's the very successful company that you've started, that you run, and you train people on so-called soft skills. I don't even know if people still call it that. After 2 years of a pandemic, I mean, one could almost say that we've all become a little feral, because we've lived in isolation, we're stuck in our houses with our families. I know right now I'm wearing very comfortable shoes because nobody can see what I'm wearing. You're wearing comfortable pants. I mean, this is the world that we're living in right now. But I found it very difficult when one has now gone out into the world a bit more, gone to a couple of functions, seen more than 2 friends at a social gathering in a safe, COVID-friendly way, of course. It all becomes a bit much. The small talk is not as great as it used to be, and you almost have to remove yourself after a period of time because it's just, okay, that's how much I can handle right now. Are you preparing to help people who probably feel a little rusty when it comes to that all-important networking skills now that we come out into this very different world that we probably should not be calling post-pandemic just yet?
Yeah, it's a great observation, and I agree with you 100%. I've been at 2 business functions this week, and I was struck by the fact that I think people are losing or have lost the ability to do small talk, because I think we've been so used to having these one-dimensional relationships across a screen. And what I noticed is people are not listening in the most mindful way. The conversation is often quite self-absorbed, and good networking is largely around listening. And so if you take listening and curiosity out of the equation, then obviously the quality of your interaction is not going to be great. So I think I think we'll get back into practice with it, but I would agree with you 100%. I think we've got to really amplify those listening skills, because now we can see the whole person, and we can actually see the non-verbal cues, which obviously we weren't able to before.
And I suppose masks still is a bit of a problem in that regard, isn't it? I mean, how do we get around that?
Yeah, I think, when you really look at someone's eyes, you can tell a lot, as to what's actually going on when you see someone's eyes.
Indeed. The book is called Mindfulness, How to Stay Sane in an Insane World. The book's author is Helen Nicholson. She is the CEO, the Chief Excitement Officer of the networking company. Very, very interesting and practical book that she's now just brought out. We thank her for her time this evening.